Something sitting on most spice racks right now raises curcumin absorption by 2,000%, but only when taken at around 20 mg alongside 2 g of curcumin, and virtually no recipe or supplement label tells you that. Here is what peer-reviewed trials measuring hs-CRP and TNF-α over 56 days actually found about the 5 spices with legitimate evidence behind them. 5 spices are sitting in most kitchens right now, and all 5 have legitimate peer-reviewed research behind them. But the gap between what a molecule does in a lab and what a pinch on your dinner plate actually delivers is enormous. Understanding that gap is not a reason to ignore these spices. It is the reason to use them correctly. We are going to walk through each one, cite the real mechanisms, quote the real doses tested in clinical trials, and tell you exactly where the evidence is strong, where it is preliminary, and where the hype has simply run ahead of the data. Turmeric contains a polyphenol called curcumin, which Johns Hopkins Medicine describes as having both antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties, but their April 2026 update carries a critical qualifier: the evidence is still developing. Here's why that caveat matters. Curcumin is lipophilic and water-insoluble, which means your gut struggles to absorb it. A clinical study found that even a high dose of 12 grams per day produced very low serum curcumin levels. Turmeric powder itself is only 3 to 5% curcumin by weight, so the golden spoon you stir into your morning oats is delivering a fraction of what most studies actually test. Johns Hopkins oncology dietitian Mary Eve Brown recommends adding turmeric to food as the safest approach, but she is clear that high-dose supplements carry interaction risks with certain medications. The culinary habit is sound. The supplement dose is a conversation to have with a clinician. This is where the kitchen chemistry gets genuinely interesting. Black pepper contains an alkaloid called piperine, and piperine does something remarkable to curcumin. It inhibits the liver and intestinal enzymes that would otherwise rapidly clear curcumin from your bloodstream. A landmark 1998 pharmacokinetic study, still the foundational citation in this field, found that co-administering 20 milligrams of piperine alongside 2 grams of curcumin in human subjects appeared to increase curcumin oral bioavailability by up to 2,000%. A December 2024 review by the UK's Committee on Toxicity confirmed that figure. In practical terms, that is roughly 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper ground alongside your turmeric. Piperine is itself under active study for its own anti-inflammatory and metabolic properties. A 2025 meta-analysis found it may modulate insulin sensitivity. Black pepper is not just a flavor enhancer here. It is, mechanistically speaking, a co-active compound. Of all 5 spices, ginger has arguably the most consistent clinical trial record. Its key bioactive compounds, 6-gingerol, 6-shogaol, and zingerone, work by inhibiting 2 major inflammatory enzymes, COX-2 and lipoxygenase, the same pathways targeted by ibuprofen. A 2025 systematic review of meta-analyses published in Frontiers in Pharmacology found that ginger supplementation was associated with significant reductions in circulating C-reactive protein, high-sensitivity CRP, and tumor necrosis factor alpha, all established markers of systemic inflammation. Separately, a July 2025 randomized controlled trial in the journal Nutrients examined ginger extract supplementation in adults with mild to moderate joint pain, tracking inflammatory markers over 56 days. Culinary doses, roughly 2 grams of fresh ginger per day, fall within the lower end of studied ranges. The shogaols, notably, are more potent than gingerols, but form primarily when ginger is dried or cooked, meaning your ground ginger may actually deliver a different, and in some respects more bioactive, profile than fresh. Cinnamon's active compound is cinnamaldehyde, which in laboratory studies inhibits NF-κB, the master transcription factor that switches on hundreds of inflammatory genes. That is a meaningful mechanism. A 2025 paper published in Aging Cell also noted associations between cinnamon and cellular health and blood sugar regulation. But here is where honesty is more useful than enthusiasm. Cinnamaldehyde is a volatile oil. Ground cinnamon older than around 6 months in a warm, light-exposed spice rack loses significant volatile oil integrity. More critically, no clinical trial has demonstrated that culinary doses deliver the serum concentrations needed to replicate the lab findings in humans. The two types most commonly sold, Ceylon and Cassia, both contain cinnamaldehyde and polyphenol procyanidins in overlapping ranges, but Cassia carries higher coumarin levels, which at chronically high supplemental doses raises liver toxicity concerns. 1 teaspoon per day on your oats is reasonable and safe. Treating it as a pharmaceutical is not. Rosemary contains 2 well-studied polyphenols, rosmarinic acid and carnosic acid. Both have demonstrated free radical scavenging and NF-κB inhibitory activity in vitro. A 2015 study in the Journal of Medicinal Food, still widely cited, documented anti-inflammatory effects of rosemary extract, and regular consumption has been associated with lower CRP levels in observational research. Cloves deserve more attention than they typically receive. Their primary bioactive compound, eugenol, inhibits KOX2 with a potency that some researchers have compared to aspirin in cell studies, though, again, the human clinical data at culinary doses is limited. Cloves are also the highest antioxidant spice, measured by ORAC value in USDA food composition data, at approximately 290,000 micromoles of Trolox equivalents per 100 grams, a number that dwarfs turmeric. The practical insight: both rosemary and cloves are research-supported additions to the spice rack, and both are dramatically under-discussed relative to the turmeric conversation. This is the section most videos skip, and it matters most. The doses used in peer-reviewed clinical trials are frequently far above culinary amounts. Curcumin trials typically use 500 to 1,190 milligrams of standardized extract daily, equivalent to roughly 10 to 60 grams of turmeric powder. Ginger trials showing reductions in inflammatory markers have used 1 to 3 grams of dried ginger extract per day, achievable with culinary use, making ginger the most practical in terms of dose-to-evidence alignment. Cinnamon trials showing blood sugar associations have used 1 to 6 grams daily, also reachable in the kitchen. The takeaway is not that these spices are useless in food. It is that the mechanism research and the dose research point in the same direction. Consistent daily culinary use, not an occasional dash, is the baseline condition under which any meaningful effect begins. Spices work as a dietary pattern, not as isolated interventions. Curcumin has more than 19,000 PubMed citations and over 400 completed clinical studies, a research footprint matched by almost no other food compound. Yet Johns Hopkins' own dietitian frames it as an addition to food, not a supplement protocol. That framing is instructive. What the evidence actually supports is a consistent dietary pattern. Turmeric and black pepper co-used in cooking, fresh or dried ginger as a daily ingredient, cinnamon in breakfast rotation, rosemary on proteins, cloves in slow-cooked dishes, and spice blends. No single spice is doing heavy lifting on its own. Each contributes a distinct bioactive compound: curcumin, piperine, gingerol, cinnamaldehyde, rosmarinic acid, eugenol, targeting overlapping but not identical inflammatory pathways. Together, as a habitual culinary pattern rather than a supplement stack, they represent some of the most research-dense ingredients you can put on a plate.